we only have 10 questions in this activity. So let's choose the best transition from the box here. There may be more than one correct answer, of course, because we know that there are many synonyms when it comes on to transitional words and phrases. The girls wanted an ice cream cone. Blank, they left the park early. And there's not much context given for some of these sentences, but let's try to use common sense and figure out how these two sentences or two ideas would naturally connect. So looking at number one, what do you think is the best transition from the box we have here on the left, this purple box? All right, you guys say so. I'm not gonna argue. I'm gonna write what you say, and at the end of the day, if we are in trouble, that's on you, because we're only gonna be using each word once. In fact, hey, here we go. You know what? Let me write both answers, and then we'll figure it out along the way. I'm seeing in fact, and I'm seeing so. So it could be so. It could be in fact. What I'll do is over here, I'll highlight the ones that we have considered so far. So, in fact. Any other options for number one? So, in fact. All right, let's go to number two. Mother didn't have time to go to the store. Blank, there was no milk in the refrigerator. Robin Hood says we could use therefore. Okay. Robin Hood says consequently. All right, I'm going to write down whatever you guys think might be it. Let me write down consequently and highlight it over here. Anything else for number two? However, Rhonda. All right, consequently / however. Let's see. Mother didn't have time to go to the store. How did you get however here? Well, we're gonna see later on if it's fine or not. I mean, we're almost out of options already, right? All right, number three. Please remove in fact from number one. I was only seeing from number three. I understand. So we're gonna move in fact, and I agree with moving in fact. Yeah, I don't think in fact matches here. So in fact is now safe. And you're saying in fact is good for number three, and I like in fact for number three. I like in fact. Robin Hood likes actually, so let's say in fact / actually. In fact / actually. All right, so here we have so / therefore. And Rhonda, you're saying similarly could work for number three. Similarly, why similarly? All right, let me write it down. Similarly. Let me give it a chance and see if it works out. All right, number four. James and his team didn't finish the project. They did work hard. All right, for number four, I'm seeing two options. I'm seeing although and I'm seeing nevertheless. So let me write those down. I'm seeing although, I'm seeing, and these are both kind of synonyms, right? So that's expected. Seeing although and I'm seeing nevertheless. All right, I'm not giving my comments on whether I think these are correct or incorrect just yet. I want us to get to the end and see if we can figure things out together. Number five, you can come with us if you are ready. You will have to ride the bus. I'm seeing otherwise. Okay, finally we have one that seems unanimous. Ooh, wrong pen. Otherwise. All right. Bam. All right, number six. It is important to complete your homework. It should be turned in on time. Robin Hood says, in fact. Music lover, thanks for being here. Wow, we're seeing three different answers. In addition, in fact, therefore. Which is correct. Therefore. All right, let me write all of these down. I'm seeing in fact as an option. I'm seeing therefore as an option, and I'm seeing in addition. All right, those are some shaky options. Some of those are shaky. But let's move on, and then we'll fix it up at the end. 7. Mrs. Simpson can be grumpy sometimes. We should help her whenever we can. I'm seeing yet from Berkeley. Anything else? I'm seeing nevertheless. And those two are very similar. I'm seeing moreover. What are you guys talking about? Moreover? Oh boy, moreover. Are you kidding? All right, let's go to 8. Students should be quiet during the play. Applause at the end is allowed. Rhonda says nevertheless. Berkeley says however. Oh, Rhonda says however, right? Not nevertheless. Okay, we have instead from Robin Hood. All right, 2 more. We're wrapping up. Number 9. The Johnson children get an allowance every week. They earn money for completing chores. All right, I see particularly from Robin Hood. I also see in fact from Music Lover. Final one, number 10. The rhino in Africa is threatened with extinction. Many species of gorilla are also endangered. Okay, we see similarly here, and we see furthermore, and we see moreover. My goodness. All right, so we've used all of these options too many times. So let's see if we can go through and make some corrections and ensure that everything is picture perfect. There are multiple possible answers, but some answers here are definitely wrong. Oh dear, we have in addition as well for the last one. All right. So let's head back to number 1 to sort this out. The girls wanted an ice cream cone. Let's look at the relationship between the ideas. The girls wanted an ice cream cone. They left the park early. So and therefore are both pretty much synonyms here, but because this is a little tricky, because they have a comma here instead of a semicolon, it's better to go with so. If you're going to use therefore, you would want to offset this with a semicolon. And we're going to get into the technical grammar of it a little bit later on. That's going to be the last thing we look at. So is a better answer for number 1, even though these two are actually synonyms. All right, we're going to work with so for number 1. Let's look at number 2. Mother didn't have time to go to the store. Consequently, or however, there was no milk in the fridge. Based on my interpretation here, there's not much context given, so my interpretation might not necessarily be correct, but I think it's correct, right? Mother didn't have time to go to the store. She didn't have time, and I think because she didn't have the time to go to the store, there was no milk. There was no milk. Why was there no milk? Because mother didn't have time to buy milk at the store. So, however, wouldn't work. However, would be showing contrast. We need something like consequently that's going to be showing consequence. So we could say consequently, we could say therefore, yeah. So this could be consequently or therefore, number 2. That's what I'm seeing. Number 3, there's no homework tonight. There has been no homework this week. So there's no homework tonight. What is the connection between that and there's no homework this week? There's no homework this week is kind of it's a similar point, but it's like a bigger, stronger, more important point. So there's no homework tonight, and so I think in fact is the best one here. Actually isn't actually bad. Actually isn't bad. We could perhaps keep actually, but I wouldn't keep similarly at all, because we're not just seeing a similarity, we're seeing one point expand into like a bigger, more important point. No homework tonight, no homework all week. Yeah. So it could be actually, but I think in fact is the best option here. All right. So I want to keep both for now. I might eliminate one by the end. Number 4, James and his team didn't finish the project, and we see an opposite idea next. They did work hard. Although is not bad, but because we have a semicolon here, although wouldn't work. We're going to get into the grammar later on, but although wouldn't work with a semicolon. So we're going to remove it. So I think we're stuck with it nevertheless. Number 5, you can come with us if you're ready. Otherwise, you will have to ride the bus. Obvious one. 6, it is important to complete your homework. Blank, it should be turned in on time. We're seeing an additional requirement to the homework. So we're going to work with in addition. Yeah, we're seeing an additional requirement for the homework. So we're going to work with in addition. Mrs. Simpson can be grumpy at times. We should help her whenever we can. So I'm kind of seeing a contrast here. She's grumpy, and a contrasting idea would be helping someone who is grumpy, right? So I don't think we could work with moreover. We're not really adding points here. I think nevertheless is a little bit better than yet here because of the punctuation. Number 8, students should be quiet during the play. Blank, applause at the end is allowed. I think however is a little bit better, just showing simple contrast. I'm going to work with however. Instead isn't really all that bad, but however is a little bit better here. I would use instead if the same sentence or phrased a little bit differently. For example, you should not applause during the play. Instead, you should applause at the end. So even with the same meaning, I would want to change the wording a little bit if I were to use instead. 9, the Johnson children get an allowance every week. Blank, they earn money for completing tasks. I like particularly. In fact, doesn't really make much sense here because we're not moving from one point to like a bigger stronger supporting point. So I might keep particularly. It's kind of giving the specifics of what the allowance is about or why they get the allowance. Well, I'm not sure what the sentence is trying to say. I'm not sure if they're getting the money in addition to their allowance or they're really telling us what the allowance is about. Could be either depending on what the writer meant. Number 10, the rhino in Africa is threatened with extinction. Blank, many species of gorilla are also endangered. This one is obviously similarly, we're looking at how two different species are in like the same situation. So for number 3, maybe I'll just remove one of these. There's no homework tonight. I think these are equally correct, but I'm gonna keep in fact, just because I need to keep one. But actually could also work, right? I haven't checked the answers for this actually, but let me see. I think there are some suggested answers. So let's see. So, and it says here, students' answers will vary. Examples, these are just examples of correct answers, right? But of course, if your answers vary, the transitions should at least have the same purpose or be like the same type of transition. So let's see if these match the answer key. You see, so, consequently, in fact, nevertheless. Oh, I have two neverthelesses. We need to eliminate one. So we need to change one of these to however, right? Yeah, let's change the first one to however. Let's change the first one to however, and the answer key would agree there. Number 5, otherwise. Number 6, it is important to complete your homework. In addition, it should be turned in on time. Furthermore. Furthermore is kinda the same, but maybe furthermore is a little bit nicer for this sentence. Yeah, because it's not just adding something, I guess, but it's also it's adding a point. Your homework should be completed, but it's giving you like one step further, not just completed, but that. So furthermore might be a little bit stronger than in addition. So I concede. I will take furthermore here. Yeah. And addition is also acceptable, but furthermore looks a little bit better. Number 6, nevertheless. 7, nevertheless. Okay. Number 8. However, although it says here although, but I think however is better. Students should be quiet during the play. However, applause at the end is allowed. Yeah. Oh, but we have two however's again. All right, since we have two however's, let's change this one to although. All right, we want to stay within the rules and only use each one once. Number 9, particularly. In addition. So it goes back to what I was discussing earlier, not being sure what the sentence is trying to say. Is it giving details on the allowance or is it talking about an additional thing? So depending on the meaning of the sentence, it could be particularly or in addition. All right, sentence is a little bit unclear. We have similarly. All right, and these are just some suggested answers, right? Examples of correct answers. You could have slightly different answers and still be okay. The idea is you need to know what the connective is trying to do, what the relationship is between the two ideas. All right, looking at these, are we fine with these? Just to stay within the rules, let me get rid of this. Do all of these sentences make sense with the transitional words and phrases? Looking at the relationship between the ideas present. Make sense? Yeah? Yeah, I think these make sense. Pretty interesting exercise. Pretty good. So we're kind of upgrading the exercise here. It's getting a little bit more difficult. We're going to use transition words or phrases from the boxes to fill in the blanks in the paragraphs. So now we have to look not just at one sentence and adding in a transition. We're looking at this entire argument and we want to add transitions in a way where everything makes sense. We cannot achieve long-term energy independence by simply extracting and refining greater amounts of limited, non-renewable resources from the earth, even from our own nation's lands. What a mouthful of a sentence. We must focus our developing renewable energy sources that will not run out or cause harm to the environment. What are we thinking so far for a transition? Looking at the first pair of sentences, we see this sentence in yellow and then this sentence in blue. How can we connect these two sentences? We cannot achieve long-term energy independence by doing this. which is by simply extracting and refining greater amounts of the limited blah blah blah. And then we have another sentence. We must focus on developing renewable energy sources. So let's look at some keywords in the sentences to figure out what the relationship is. We cannot achieve long-term energy independence by simply extracting and refining greater amounts of limited non-renewable resources from the earth. That's what this sentence is saying. The second sentence now is telling us what we should do. We must focus on developing renewable energy sources that will not run out or cause harm to the environment. What's the relationship between these two sentences? Are we seeing the continuation of an idea? Are we seeing an example being given? Are we seeing an illustration? Are we seeing a contrast? What are we seeing? We're seeing a contrast. That's right. So which one of these transitions fit most suitably? Looking at the chat here, we have instead, we have instead, we have instead, we have in that case, we have instead, we have instead, we have contrast. Yeah, we see contrast between the two ideas. We shouldn't do A, we should do B. That's what we're seeing. We shouldn't do A, we should do B. We shouldn't do A, instead we should do B, right? We shouldn't be just using up all of this limited non-renewable energy and focusing on exploiting that. Instead, what we should do is this: focus on the renewable energy sources. Right? So if the ideas are too big and confusing, look for keywords within the sentences and see if there's agreement or disagreement. See how these ideas relate. Definitely a contrast. We shouldn't do A, instead we should do B. All right, let's move to the next one. Blank, that does not mean that we can immediately shut down our production of non-renewable fossils on which we currently rely. All right, so let's follow the story of the narrative, right? We're saying in the beginning, looking at yellow, we can't just dig out all of this energy that's all of this non-renewable energy that's going to be finished in the next couple of decades. Instead, we should look at the renewable energy that will not run out, that will not cause harm. You know, the wind energy, your solar energy, stuff like that. And then we're kind of going back on another 180 and saying, well, it doesn't mean that we're going to shut down our productions of the non-renewable fossil fuels. So we already have investments in this kind of energy. We can't just shut down all of this investment. We can't just close down everything. So how do we connect those ideas? All right, I'm seeing in the chat, of course. Yeah, of course. And this is a way in which we are acknowledging that even though this particular type of energy source isn't good for the environment, it's not as if we can just ignore it and just stop using it all of a sudden, right? So we use of course because it's making a point that should be very obvious. I'm not saying that we're just going to shut down all the coal mines all of a sudden. That's going to create more harm than good if we just shut down everything. And that should be obvious, right? All right, next. Blank, we must continue to meet the nation's current and ever-growing needs. Without fossil fuels, this cannot currently be done. So we're on to the next one. How do we connect this idea with this one here? How do we connect the orange to the blue? In other words, in that case, after all, which one? Could it be in other words? Are the 2 points just saying the same thing in different words? They're not just saying the same thing in different words. So we wouldn't say in other words. One is kind of more giving you a reason for the other one. So it's saying, look back at the orange. We can't just shut down our production of non-renewable fossil fuels on which we currently rely. We rely on it. We can't just shut it all down. And why can't we shut it all down? We must continue to meet our current needs. If we're relying on these things, we need them to meet our needs. We can't just shut it down. So we can say, after all, we must continue to meet our current needs. What about the last connection? And it does take some practice to identify these connections. So don't be dismayed if it doesn't occur to you immediately. Achieving energy independence will require a gradual condition to renewable energy rather than a sudden drastic switchover. In other words, Music Lover says in other words, Robin Hood says in that case, which is it? In that case, says Ashley G. It's pretty tricky. Well, for me, I'm not really seeing an answer that I'm perfectly comfortable with. I want to write something like ultimately, but I might have to settle for in other words. Or so in other words here would kind of mean in summary. It's basically summarizing all of what was said before. In other words, achieving energy independence will require gradual transition to renewable energy rather than a sudden drastic switch over. This is kind of reiterating the three previous points like in a single sentence. It's not a perfect transition for me, but I think it's the best we have to work with up here. Tricky one. You might have a slightly different answer, but I'm kind of fine with how that looks. I mean, there's so many transitions. So depending on how we really want to connect the ideas, we can have slightly different answers. So it's not, I'm not giving you the gospel here. I just want us to be able to look at individual ideas and try to imagine a suitable connection between them. Yeah. All right, here we are, and I'm working this in real time with you guys. So yeah, it's pretty tough. It's pretty tough, but it's interesting. Yeah. Is it time to do away with the penny? The U.S. Mint, the bureau responsible for producing coins in the United States, spent about 1.99 cents to produce each 1 cent penny in 2019. Dash, it cost about 2 pennies to make 1 penny. What do we think is the first answer here? So we have this, and we need to connect it to this. How do we connect the pink to the green? So let's look at what each idea is saying, what each sentence is saying. The first one here is saying that the bureau spends about 1.99 cents. This is about 2 cents, right? Approximately 2 cents to produce each 1 cent penny. So it costs them 2 cents to make the 1 cent coin, right? It costs about 2 cents to make 1 1 cent coin. And then we have here the next idea. It costs about 2 pennies or 2 cents to make 1 penny. But this in the green is just a simpler way of saying this in the purple. Instead of saying 1.99 to produce the 1 cent penny, we just say it costs about 2 pennies to make 1 penny. It's the same fact reiterated in a simpler way. So we're going to write to put it simply. Yeah. To put it simply. And we could also say in other words, if that were an option. In other words, it costs us 2 pennies to make 1 penny. To put it simply, in simpler words. Yeah. All right. Next up, blank. Millions of taxpayer dollars are wasted every year. Right, how do we connect this next idea? Someone says for these reasons. Someone says as a result. Well, actually, it's one reason. So we wouldn't say for these reasons. Because remember, the green is just repeating the purple. So what we'll say is as a result of this, of how expensive it is to make the pennies, millions of taxpayer dollars are wasted every year. Yeah, as a result, or consequently, stuff like that. All right, next up, blank. The purchasing power of the lowly penny is almost non-existent. A single penny buys nothing anymore. Robin Hood, I think you're on point here. You're on the money, literally, almost literally. Furthermore, because we're adding an additional point to support the previous point. So we've already stated that making pennies is wasting money, right? Because it costs more than what we're actually getting in the end. To make 1 penny, it costs 2 pennies. So we're just losing pennies, simply put. And so taxpayers' money is being wasted. On top of that, furthermore, additionally, moreover, the purchasing power of the lowly penny is non-existent. So not only is it not feasible to create pennies, but pennies don't even serve a purpose anymore because nobody can buy anything with a penny. So what's the point? All right, blank. Many have called upon the federal government to suspend production of the penny and ultimately remove it from circulation. So now we're at the point where people are saying, no more pennies, no more pennies, no more pennies. Yes, Robin Hood. Now we're at for these reasons. So because of everything we've talked about before, because of how it costs too much to make the pennies, and how the pennies are making pennies is wasting taxpayers' money, and pennies are valueless. For all of these reasons, people are saying, let's stop making pennies. All right. The last one, blank. Many Americans are sentimentally attached to the Lincoln penny. They want it to remain in circulation despite the costs. All right, so Robin Hood, you're on the money again. We're having a turning point. Now we're getting to something that is in contrast. So we need, however, it's a contrast because we've just explained why people want to stop the penny from being produced. And now we're getting into the fact that people are attached to the penny and want it to be produced, right? So we've linked the ideas, we've figured out how they connect, what the relationship between the ideas is, and so we're able to find the correct or the appropriate transitional words and phrases. This one I think was much easier than the previous one. So finally, we're going to just look at some grammatical aspects of the transitions. All right, so I'm just going to focus on a few main points here.